Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. This is day 3 of my promised daily live streams this week, following, of course, the long anticipated WWDC live stream, following my aftermath coverage part 1 and part 2 today, obviously. So we've had a lot of fun. A lot of you have installed the betas, a lot more than I actually expected. So I'm getting a lot of feedback from you guys, which is helping me collect my own thoughts. Obviously, this is still beta 1 across the board, iOS 26, macOS 26, iPadOS 26. I do have to say, I don't know whether it's indexing or just devices. I don't know, like ironing out their own bugs in a way. But my own experience over the course of like yesterday evening and today actually had more time because I worked from very early on, but only to up around 3 p.m. And I had a decent lunch break, even testing out some features on the go and looking how battery life performs. And I have to say, there are a lot of things that, like little nuances that I'm starting to experience, that I'm starting to be more conscious of, that really convince me of the overall aesthetic, the overall vision. That, of course, being said, and as I've said it several times now, iOS 26, all those operating systems with their new designs, they still need more polish, but we are still 3 months away from the official release, right? All the way through July, all the way through August, half of September, and still half of June. That's 3 months, and probably Apple is going to get a wave of even more feedback beyond us beta testers once it lands in the hands of actual users. So by iOS 26.1.2, I expect plenty of changes to happen. But what do I mean? What has actually been like connecting with me? Well, first of all, let me actually connect with you guys, because you have been tremendous. You've been watching the videos, liking them, sharing them, commenting on them. It really helps. So I hope you guys do the same today. As always, if you also want to support me directly, you can become a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan, who are MarkTech Pro Max supporters. Whenever you catch me live, you can also donate directly to the channel in the form of a super chat or super sticker. But just stay engaged, just chat. It all helps with the algorithm. It all helps me to know what you guys like to see being covered. We have Riley joining the chat, waving and saying hi. We have Maximus joining, saying he's working out right now and listening today, collecting that delicious live chat XP. We have Rosa joining the chat. Oh, and we have Max leaving an 11-month member chat. Man, you're close to a year. Haven't expected that. Saying, glad you're doing well and the streams are great. Well, thank you for your great support. That means the world to me. Nathan Baker saying, hello, Mark. How are you? Well, I'm fine. Actually got a little bit of rest after work today, so my voice is fine. If my teeth are red, I just ate like a box of strawberries fresh out of the market. So I am doing really fine. Thank you. I've been having a lot of fun collecting my own impressions and getting yours, of course, as well. And we have Ben Vinny, longtime supporter, one of our most active Discord members. Daily shout out to join the Discord, saying, hello, Mark. What is the topic for today's live? Well, we are kind of continuing on the coverage that we've been on, especially since yesterday, now that the betas are out, now that more of you have hands-on experience with them, now that I have more hands-on experiences with them. And one of the first things I would like to do, not necessarily quite the first thing, I would like to react to the Joanna Stern, I believe, interview with Craig Federighi and... Oh my God, I always forget it. That's not Eddie Q. Jesus, how could I forget his name? Oh, I'm totally blanking. It will be in the video, I'm sure. Somebody who's more knowledgeable. Jesus, like people will come to the stream. Oh, guys, I found this new Apple sheep. And now the stupid moron in front of you cannot even name one of the biggest Apple execs. Jesus Christ. But yes, sorry. I'm saving lives on the side. Riley, I saw another interview about Apple AI. There's plenty of stuff. There's like a 45-minute video that I downloaded from Tom's guy. side. I'm not sure if it's worth watching. Maybe some of you have pre-watched, can explain to me if it's worth reacting to. But yeah, there is a lot. Like a lot of people, because of John Gruber and his event is like an interview, basically a prolonged, lighthearted interview with Apple executives usually, right, around dub. That was canceled because of his article. I mean, I can bring that up, right? Just for all of you who are new, John Gruber, something rotten. Right, that was actually in the middle of March, so that was when all the fallout was coming out for the Siri delay, and Apple addressed it now, of course, during dub, saying they will give us more info in the coming year. There are some people who accuse them of basically having like vaporware AI, right? Like stuff that never actually launches. But like John Gruber basically been so over the top in his criticism that Apple canceled like that event. What people don't understand is that event is like that show is not a regular thing for Apple to do. Apple sits down with journalists, sure, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. But the interviews they usually have with John Gruber were always far more in depth than with any other journalist. They basically were doing him a favor because he is a long-standing name in the business. They know him personally. They liked him personally. And yes, I said liked, past tense. But he screwed that up for himself because he was not criticizing them in a very journalistic way. And in fact, if you now look at Joanna Stern's interview, and I only saw a glimpse of it, but that one seems harsh, but fair, and also slightly comedic. That's kind of Joanna Stern's vibe. She's always playing like the straight woman, right? Like the person basically not in on the joke and being serious, but that's the joke with her. So yeah, not excusing or punishing journalists, but really John Gruber wasn't punished. He was taken away something that was basically a reward that he used to get. Yeah. It's the one with Mark. Yeah. Wait, what? Which one with Mark? Guys, there is a. You know what? I'm doing what I did yesterday. I'm sharing the Discord link in the chat. Link to never expire, save. Why do I have to type that in every time? So if you want to share some kind of link, do that in the Discord. Because YouTube does not allow link sharing, unfortunately, in the comment section, because porn, because spam, stuff like that, right? So I'll just have to switch to my regular account briefly. So there it is, if you want to share. And yeah, okay, from Tom's Guide. Gruber show was educational. Yeah, I fully agree. It was much more in-depth than anything else that Apple provides usually, and that's because they had this special relationship with him. And if you have this special access, you can criticize the company. In fact, you should. That helps you keep your image. But you cannot be this aggressive. Like, this article is insane. Like, if you know what Apple usually internally thinks of themselves, right? Like, Apple doesn't even have what internally is described as a minimum viable product. And Apple has never really been successfully targeted for like flat out misleading marketing. Like, sometimes we get bullshit cases, like when the iPhone XS had wallpapers in marketing that didn't show that the display was rounded, and therefore it isn't a perfect 5.8 and 6.5 inches, right? It's technically 5.68 and 6.43 or something bullshit like that. And some garbage person tried to sue them because of that. Of course, Apple was going to react really very angry to this. So I know some people are calling this petty, but I think if you look at their interactions with a lot of other journalists, you'll find that they can be fine with some level of confrontation, as they should be, of course. They're in a very high position. It invites journalistic scrutiny, but just not this. Before I fully start with the interview, some of my own stuff. First, this is actually something that I only noticed, like, I don't know why, but somehow, like a day later than I should have. But basically, and you must imagine, basically, while this is happening, I'm doing this. So I actually thought that the glow around the icons, I love it. I think it's very cheesy in the best way, but it was tiny bit overdone. If you gave me the slider for the glow intensity, I would tune it down like 10-15%. But then I saw how it reacted with parallax, right? Basically your phone being like using its gyroscope, and this is how it looks, right? I'm very quickly moving my phone here. It's just 4 seconds of a video. I shared that on Discord. This is fantastic. This looks so fun. And yeah, DUI isn't finished. A lot of that will change. Now, will all of it change with iOS 26? History would suggest not. Like, a lot of iOS 7 imperfections were addressed more with iOS 8 and 9. However, don't forget that iOS 7 back in the day did not have the same kind of huge publicly available developer beta, and even public betas were not really like popular back then. I'm not even sure if they were that big of a thing with iOS 7. So there is a lot of stuff here that can, will, and should be refined. But I'm just telling you that not everything is like a catastrophe as some people are making it out to be. Also, some elements work with accelerometer, but not all of it. Yeah, I've also mentioned that the iPad is very unpredictable, because I literally like moved around my iPad on the first day to see if that's happening, and that not happening on my iPad actually kind of made me forget about my iPhone for a bit. But then I saw it working on my iPhone, and then I tested it on my iPad, and it worked. So it either fixed itself or it's not consistent right now. But the icons at least should be doing it. So I'm a little bit, I would say, confused. But then again, it is the very first developer beta. Nathan Baker, when you ask out the apps in the background, what does that look like? Exit out. In the background? I don't know what you mean, man. How do I exit out? You mean if I'm in the notification, if I'm in the multitasking UI? That's pretty much identical to what it is now. There is like, it's because the apps themselves are not supposed to be glass, so swiping them up to close them is still pretty much the same. And Riley, according to icons do the glow effect, folders don't. Let me quickly look in the app library. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be doing it, at least here on my iPad. But I guess there are hierarchy levels, because in the folders they are the icons. It's all a little bit unpredictable, unfortunately. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I just got some family stuff going on here on the side. So if I might get a little bit inattentive for a few seconds, that's the same. That's the reason. If those elements hard to see outside, depends probably a little bit on the screen that you're using. Like, I imagine on the iPhone SE second generation with a 4.7-inch LCD, small screen and everything, it's probably hard to see. It works pretty well on like my iPhone 15 Pro Max. Apple Apple makes sure that the glow is noticeable. But then again, I would also argue there's probably a pretty different blur between the Mac and the iPhone. So the iPhone is definitely a little bit more glowy. And some of the glow effect, by the way, is a tiny bit broken. Like there is some bad anti-aliasing or lack of anti-aliasing, I guess, with the glow effect. So if we go actually here, now here everything looks fine. This is primarily for the home screen. But like when you look at some of the glow effect around, if you go very close on it, sometimes on the home screen, you will find that there is like a fuzziness to the effect that unfortunately like breaks it looking like glowiness and makes it look a lot more bad. So if you are on a low pixel density screen, that might be more of an issue right now. Not sure. I mean, it hasn't been an issue on my Mac and iPad, which are a lot lower pixel density than my iPhone at the very least. Yeah, but those are the kind of issue I'm mentioning. Is it true there's going to be a public beta that will release in July? Yeah, that has been the case for years and years now. Like, in fact, the developer betas used to be locked behind a paid developer account. That's why the public beta profiles website was a thing in trying to share these kinds of licenses and basically profiles that allow you to install those betas. Now Apple made the developer betas basically as public as the public beta, but the public beta also gets Apple's recommendation. So you are supposed to be, if you're actually an enthusiast, to install the public beta, right? So you can give Apple feedback and stuff like that. The developer beta is very much for testing apps. Like I mentioned, for example, how the German most popular app for public transport is broken right now with iOS 26. That is something you are supposed to start testing right now, to be honest, because you never know how big some of the issues are. And the reason why I'm showing this, because I showed you guys basically this, right, which is the control center not having the correct, in my opinion, I'm not sure what Apple thinks, the correct blur underneath it. Now, it is a tiny bit complicated of a question because obviously the glass itself has this blurriness, but you can have two different kind of blurs over next to each other. It's definitely better than having this darkening filter on top of it. So, and I've seen some people give out a shout out to reducing transparency. I did it, and honestly, I hate it visually. It's great for accessibility. That's what it is designed for. It looks horrible on the iPad because you have to imagine the iPad control center only goes down over the top right portion, right? So it has the control center, and then it almost has this like dark nebulous cloud. And this cloud is actually like, it doesn't have a clear shape, right? I mean, obviously, it largely mimics the shape of control center, but it doesn't have like super clear boundaries because it's supposed to like, with transparency on, it's supposed to transition into your actual like wallpaper and the rest of your home screen. So yes, for now, I would recommend you use reduced transparency. It helps with battery life most likely, though my phone has neither been running hot, and today has been a pretty warm day, nor has the battery been draining abnormally quickly. I would argue probably around 10-15% more so than usually, but that's very, very normal. In fact, I would be shocked if that weren't the case on a first beta. So, Sir Holmes, use the search button on music apps and classical apps. It's not just there. Like the search button has like this very cool, like it's beyond Gaussian blur, right? It's like a thick piece of glass that's designed to have like this Fresnel effect through it. It has like its own caustics from what's underneath, just like water, because light can throw its own shadow in a way, but obviously because it's light, it's not shadow. So yeah, you get like all these great like glass physics almost through that. Yeah, these search buttons, a lot of the system buttons and messages and stuff like that, they're super fun, and they are what making me fall in love with it. And one of such glass elements is in the app library. In fact, I'm specifically calling out the app library because I think the app library, and you can disagree with me, but I think it's perfect. Now, would it be perfect for readability to somebody who might be visually impaired? No. But for people who aren't, right, I think this looks perfect. It's vibrant. You have this very defined but beautiful blur. As you might see, I have my cat wallpaper underneath. I've been also experimenting with the spatial wallpapers. They're not as impressive as they look in like the Apple demo. You probably need to really make sure you take your photo in mind with it. One thing that has stood out to me is how good and on how many photos spatializing actually works. So, and thankfully, it's also just a feature in the Photos app. Yeah, you can you can spatialize your photo for a wallpaper, but you can also just do that in the Photos app, and it works basically instantaneously. So that's cool. And yeah, what I was gonna say here is actually like, look at this. This is exactly what I want Control Center to be. Have this blur, and then have different kinds of glass there that I can click on. That's exactly what I want. Nathan Baker, I do like the animation when you slide to unlock. I also love the animation for Notification Center. When you slide up from above, you have like this refracting glass effect on the lowest level. In fact, if you don't actually plan on using like all of Notification Center, all of the lock screen, you just move it halfway down, you still see all of your messages and stuff like that, and it only blurs, it only turns into your wallpaper once it actually hits the ground. So a lot of cool stuff, a lot of attention to detail, but also a lot of stuff that I imagine in the beginning can be somewhat confusing. So that's why I'm talking about this, my own impressions. On the Mac, I've also been playing around with feature, but one last design thing. Why can I not click on that? Hello? Is that broken? No. It's still the first beta, and it's a slightly updated preview app. I've played around just briefly with the clear effect for the icons and everything. I think it looks decent in bright mode. I actually haven't taken a screenshot of that. But with dark mode combined, it just looks very lifeless, right? And for such a lively operating system design, I just think it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's surprisingly legible depending on like how used you are to all the icons and everything, and also depending on what wallpaper you're using, but it really wouldn't be my first recommendation. In fact, if anything, I do have to say, my recommendation is to use the bright icons. This design really, while it still works well with dark mode, it's really designed for the vibrancy and the brightness. I mean, think about it. When does glass most shine, right? It's literally when it's like bathed in light. So yeah, use the light mode. Sir Holmes, I think it's great and well thought out. The competition always goes online and bash on Apple for no good reason. Yeah, and especially for the first beta, right? Like this feature for this problem, right? Like the bad blur or the non-existing blur in Control Center, right? That to me almost looks like a bug, right? or it's a little bit of an oversight right now, but this is the definition of something that gets fixed in the next 3 months. Whether it's with the kind of blur that I'm suggesting, or with a much darker tint to what's happening underneath, which would be effectively a blurring, right? You are killing all the details in the background at that point. But yeah, and especially the thing that has annoyed me the most, that just for Twitter clout and whatever, some developers or people who are ostensibly developers, maybe they're more content creators these days, but they still have a history of developing apps and development tools and whatever. And they're coming out and saying, oh, look what Apple is shipping. And I'm like, Apple is not shipping anything. We're 3 months away from the official release. And even the official release, by the way, will probably coincide with the existence of iOS 18.6. Right, which will most likely be like, for all those of you who do not want to be early adopters of the new design, of potential bugs, right? I think this is really just as thought through as iOS 7, and it includes some of the same problems as iOS 7, which is overcorrecting of what was before. iOS 7 also had issues with the keyboard and control center being too transparent or too translucent in different ways, which usually that didn't mean you actually saw what's underneath, like what's happening with control center, but you, like, the colors from beneath, they were like refracting through, and they were doing that so intensively that they were kind of messing up with certain UI elements. And also, depending on the device you use, those effects look different. Like, I always remember on my iPad 2, that keyboard was almost like ghost transparent, right? So, yeah, there is just a lot. And obviously, iOS 7 had the overcorrection with the very bright neon colors, right, which were toned down later on. You could argue that could be seen as like what's happening with how extreme some of the glass effects are. But overall, yeah, I agree. This is a very well thought out design. And it's coming from Alan Dye. It's coming from the guy who designed Vision OS. Now, I would argue with him philosophically a little bit about what it means to have those glass designs in the three-dimensional space that's being rendered in front of you with Vision Pro, and it's interacting with the camera throughput of your Jesus, why am I blanking on this? Of your cameras, right? Basically, of your video feed, of your real world. That's what makes it augmented reality. On a two-dimensional screen that you tap directly, or that you interact with a mouse directly with, it's different, and I think it should be more subtle in many ways. But those are fine-tuning things. The core design, like, you cannot tell me that any operating system right now has anything as pretty as the search button here on App Library. In fact, and I think that's also what one of you meant, is when you click on a button that looks like this, it will glow where you tap it, right? That's obviously best seen with a screen recording, because that's kind of lost on you where you tap it, though it slightly bleeds out from where your finger touches. But then you can almost like swipe around it left and right, and you can see the glow following you. Do you think TikTok, Instagram, YouTube apps are going to get updated to glass? No, but I also don't think, maybe some of them could get like the pause play interface, right, with the glass. But overall, first of all, YouTube has Material 3 Expressive, right? Love it or not, this is what they're sticking with. So this is what's going to be YouTube. I think TikTok has honestly better problems right now, bigger problems on their hands with all the potential bans, the potential regulatory oversight. I don't think they're going to be redesigning their apps anytime soon. Meta, Facebook, they're also very proud. They're also very anti-Apple in a lot of the things they do. So specifically those three apps that you mentioned, all of them actually have very good reason to not do it. Do I think that a lot of smaller apps and a lot of very iOS specific apps will do it, yes. But that's a slightly different story than those mega giants who have their own brand image, who are basically their own platforms in many ways. Benveni, this design came to stay. People will get used to it later on. True. Nathan, Benveni, when more new updates come out, I'll get more better. It will get better. Okay, so that's what I've been collecting. I mean, I also played with a Nintendo Switch 2. Knowing my audience, that probably doesn't interest you too much. Guys, we have about twice as many people watching as we have likes. So please leave a like. That helps tremendously. It helps the algorithm know that I'm not completely trash at what I'm doing right now. It also genuinely helps attract new people to the streams. I mean, we see new names every day. We see new names here, new names in the Discord. So just liking helps a lot. So if you could do that, thank you so much. Yeah, and I think with almost half an hour of kind of intro babbling and giving my own impressions, some small stuff for the Mac. This is the clipboard history stuff. Great, it even worked with the Discord stuff that I copied on my iPad. This is cool. I'm surprised that Apple launched a feature like this. With first of all, the user interface is not thus far very Apple-y, but it's probably for the best when it comes to like data and everything. Like I'm almost surprised that with a link, it doesn't generate a link preview, right? Like it does in Messages. But hey, again, it's the first beta. And what I'm more surprised at actually is the fact that this has not come in any kind of way to iPhone and iPad. So obviously we know that Spotlight Search is a feature that Apple deeply associates with the Mac. So I kind of understand why some of the more advanced Spotlight Search functionalities are right now Mac exclusive. But the clipboard history, kind of making it a part of Spotlight Search, but then, I mean, you can literally just put it in the menu bar long after you closed it in Spotlight Search. So I really don't quite understand it. Did you buy Nintendo Switch? Good luck paying £90 for games. Yeah, no, I didn't buy it. I might buy a revision. For one, the screen is ass. Like it's not terrible literally, but like if you're used to like an iPhone promotion screen or a mini LED screen on your iPads and Macs, I mean, if you've ever seen the tandem OLED screen on a M4 iPad Pro, and I'm not even asking it should have been that good, but 400 nits of max brightness is bad in my opinion. The response times are pretty trash, especially for a screen that doesn't actually support real HDR. I mean, it technically supports HDR10 on like the back end, but the screen does nothing to render it. It does not have individually controllable backlight zones. It does not have a very high peak brightness level. It doesn't even have really great contrast to like simulate some HDR features. And it's pretty big, and I'm not like, obviously I use a 13-inch iPad Pro. I'm the one to complain, right? But I feel like because my nieces, my nephew, they play with their Switches. My cousin owns like a Switch OLED. Does she? Or is it a regular one? I always forget. But like I always felt like those were really borderline for like handhelds. But especially if you also make it as big as the new Switch. First of all, the bezels are really thick. They're thicker, twice as thick easily as on the Switch OLED. But then even more importantly, you don't even give me great battery life, right? You could have used that size. I mean, the weight is actually not bad. You could have made it 10% heavier and just gone from a 5,000 milliampere hour battery to like a 7,000 milliampere hour battery. And then at least the battery wouldn't be ass. And don't come at me with money questions. You're looking at producing this piece of shit for 8 years. It's fine if you were to largely break even. That's what Sony does. And ask Microsoft. They still lose a ton of money on every Xbox they sell. Riley, it's the most sold one though. Which one do you mean? Do you mean games like Mario Kart World being now super expensive? I mean, I could buy the bundle, but I don't really care for Mario Kart. Which features they showed in WWDC will come out in later on? Is hold screen and screen call available? I wouldn't know. Like, I don't get fucking regular phone calls, much less spam calls. First of all, it's much less of an issue here in Europe than in America. And secondly, even if it was an issue, it still wouldn't be like a daily occurrence for me. So yeah, that's something I just simply cannot test. But I assume some stuff will get rolled out later. And I mean, all the ID features, for example, they're like US exclusive. So sounds like a thunderstorm is brewing, but it's still bright outside. It was just a very loud car. Okay, guys, we've been talking about everything but this, even though we've been emotionally preparing for this. After iJustine's pretty garbage interview yesterday, I wanted to react to somebody a bit more professional. So this is Joanna Stern from the Wall Street Journal. I still don't remember your name, brother, so hopefully your name will come up. Jesus, is it Scott something? Jesus, I almost want to call him Steve Wozniak.
Siri should be as
okay. So going back, making it a little bit louder for myself. As always, guys, let me know if it's loud or too loud or not loud enough for you. How my voice mixes, if the audio and video quality is working all right for you. I might be covering up a part of Craig's face. You know what? I'm actually going to make myself a tiny bit. No, you know what? I'm going to put myself on the bottom here for this. So I'm not going to slim myself down. That's what's already happening in real life. Losing a lot of weight. Sir Holmes, am I the only person that doesn't care about the chatbot? It's useless stuff. No. The problem with chatbots, and I guess that's a good entry point for me to give my opinion to those of you who are relatively new. I don't understand why people are asking Apple to enter the chatbot market like fully, right? I understand that not everyone, like some people are just saying, okay, Siri needs to be better even for like system level controls. And I agree. And Siri needs to have personal awareness of your own information. Siri needs to have on-screen awareness. I mean, we now have a little bit step towards that with visual intelligence. However, one thing that I desperately still try to understand is what is different about Apple entering the chatbot or competitive market right now, right? Your Geminis, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, even your freaking Groks. Jesus, the names get stupider and stupider. What is the difference between that and before that, asking Apple to join the search engine market? Apple never did, and Apple was fine. In fact, they kind of made a killer deal out of it by making Google search the default search engine on iPhone, right? What is different from that, right? What is different from the chatbot to asking Apple to make their own YouTube competitor? Apple never entered that market. They still kept a podcast, right? A lot of people were saying, oh, Apple has podcasts, but podcasts like are a limited portion. Yes, Apple understands that, believe me. Like, they need to like expand the podcast app to be just like the YouTube app. And I'm like, what? Like, Apple does not need to be everywhere. Apple is primarily a hardware company. They design their operating systems. They design a shit ton of apps for that operating system. They design developer tools for third-party applications and everything. But Jesus Christ, it's so stupid. I fully understand you, Sir Holmes. I don't understand why people are so especially hell-bent on like asking for the chatbot features for Siri. But yeah, now that I've given you that explanation, let's get started.
Siri should be as good, if not better, than the competition.
Again, that depends. That's actually the part of the video that I saw. No pre-watch, just like 10 seconds of pre-watch or a 22. Again, it depends on what you're actually comparing it to in that regard, I would argue. Because yes, should Siri be as responsive and everything? But the people always forget Siri actually is fantastic. I just activated her on my iPad, proving myself wrong in the process. But Siri actually is very good at all the basics: sending messages, creating notes, reminders, calendar entries, doing a basic photo search and whatever. Now with ChatGPT, if you ask a very complicated question, it's actually pretty good at recognizing, even without you saying ChatGPT, right? It will just route that question to ChatGPT, and a lot of people will say, oh, it needs to answer that itself. Do you forget how Siri started? Siri never answered smart questions herself. People have no understanding of history. Like, Siri was routing those questions to Wolfram Alpha and their knowledge graph, which was pretty much the most advanced at that time, right? Like, Apple never made their own search engine underneath for Siri. In fact, they switched, for example, for image search. They tried to make it work with Bing. I guess Microsoft probably paid them some money. Now it's back to Google search, right? Apple has always relied on information analysis from the internet by the big guys because they're primarily a hardware company. Why is there so much more hate for Siri than there is the fact that Google launches a piece of hardware in 2024 that's based on a node from 2022 with significant issues when it comes to sustained performance. It has the multi-core performance of a 4-year-old iPhone or worse. It has the single core performance of a 5 or 6-year-old iPhone in many ways. So Apple is less behind on those software things than many companies are behind in competition to Apple on hardware things. Again, the software companies, not talking like Xiaomi is a hardware company, Huawei is a hardware company, right? But when I look at Microsoft, at Google, and I see them entering those markets, I saw, for example, the Microsoft Xbox Ally, and the base version is coming out with an RDNA 2 and a Zen 2 based processor, basically the same thing that's in the Steam Deck, the 3-year-old $400 Steam Deck, and that's what you want to base your new Xbox handheld platform in late 2025? Really? How much will it cost to be justified that? $200? Jesus. And I'm and I feel like all of that gets conveniently ignored because, oh, but Siri is a big part of the OS. Says who? How many people do you see in real life screaming not at Siri, but at Google Gemini, at ChatGPT? Why is Siri supposed to be a center of the operating system, even though that's never what Apple sold her as? Jesus, I'm getting emotional again.
I think ultimately it should be. That's
But
certainly
it's not right now.
That's certainly our mission.
I'm here.
Guys, can you type something in the chat? My chat looks like it deleted all old messages. I have no idea what's happening. Hope I haven't screwed up anything.
And I just sat down with Apple executives.
Senior personal tech columnist. Okay. Personal tech is I always see it as consumer tech, but granted, I guess in the consumer space, you have to kind of include also more pro stuff. So Riley's typing. Okay, so the chat is working. Thank God.
Rigi and Greg Joswiak.
Greg Joswiak. That's why. Greg and Greg. That's why I was confused. I was no, his name isn't Craig, but
There are a few bits of the interview where we talk about those Siri delays and the future of AI for the company.
Again, this is a weird focus, but I guess it makes sense because Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, they're also very much connected to politics and to business stuff. So I guess it makes sense for them to focus on something that's like really bringing up a lot of company stock values and things like that. And that's AI. Sir Holmes, in Apple, I trust they have really smart people. And it's not just that, right? I mean, think about the people who made the humane AI pin, right? A lot of them were ex-Apple people, right? Who did good job working at Apple. Or think of Fidel and people who worked on the iPod, right? The issue is that a lot of smart people do not quite understand why a certain like command structure exists, right? It's not to subjugate you, it's not to insult your intelligence, but I feel like Scott Forstall was a good example of not understanding that with Steve leaving and Tim becoming CEO, you might have felt always like you were on one level with Tim, right? Because Tim was the finances guy and the logistics guy, and you were the software guy. And you kind of thought that maybe your contributions to the company were more important. But at this point, now with Tim in charge, you have to bend the knee. You weren't chosen for CEO. In fact, you weren't chosen for CEO by Steve. Steve wanted Tim to be the CEO. So, by the way, a lot of the people who are like, oh, Tim Cook is doing everything wrong, Steve would be turning in his grave. And like, you realize that, first of all, Steve knew Tim incredibly well. Tim has dedicated like most of his life at this point to this company. He chose him for CEO. And I'm like, I feel like with all of the current stuff, it's like the structure that Apple has, that even trying to mimic some of the incentives and whatever that Steve created around like software development, hardware development, right? The philosophy behind it, I guess, is a better term, right? Like, that's what makes smart people work well when they are at Apple, and when they leave Apple, were losing that and trying to think of themselves, oh my God, I'm basically a god. I was high up at Apple. I helped make the iPod or whatever, or I was even involved to some degree on the iPhone. Now I'm gonna make the best thing since sliced bread. And I think that, to be honest, even with love from some of the design stuff, like for like the charities and that luxury stuff, whatever, that's a lot of it is garbage. It's show-offy. It's bougie. It's so not what Apple and Steve ever liked. But people will say like, oh, Johnny is gone. Apple is dead. I'm like, sure, it's a hit to Apple. If Johnny was still highly motivated, if his own philosophies weren't clashing with Apple going a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier and stuff like that, a little bit more focused on cooling and battery life, right? Like, I would love him back, yeah. But I say that about my ex, right? My biggest ex, the one that I've been in the longest relationship with, right? The first 2.5, 3 years were fantastic. And if I could get that person back, right? In some ways, yeah, maybe. And I mean specifically like the vibe. But even I have also changed. So you can never go back, right? It's like the thing from The Wizard of Oz, right? Like, Apple is changing. We all are changing, and Apple is changing with us. We are changing with Apple. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm compensating it with wild gestures in the air. But what I'm trying to say is we all have things we love, whether it's skeuomorphism or a person to a degree. But we have to understand we change, the person changed, designs change, and we all have to adapt. That's just part of adulthood. That's part of life. Nathan Baker, do you know when Apple releases iOS 18.5.1? No, why would I, right? I don't have a grasp on that. I would assume that by beta 2, we might be down to like a somewhat parallel releases, right? So maybe Apple releases on Tuesday the latest iOS 26 beta, right? But then on Thursday and Friday they would release the betas, when, if they have any, for iOS 18. That's kind of where I expect it to happen.
Stay tuned for the full interview soon. Last year, you announced a smarter AI-driven Siri. Where is she?
This could have been a chip talk, but no, let's
really
talk about our
two-phased
exes. Yeah, that's true, man.
Plan two versions of an architecture to deliver a great Siri. And as we got into the conference, we had V1 working to do basic the capabilities that we showed off at the conference. So we had some real software we were able to demonstrate there and show what was coming. But it didn't converge in the way, quality-wise, that we needed it to. We had something working, but then...
Yeah, and also, like, a lot of people who are accusing this of vaporware, the only article that we have gotten with any kind of insight says it worked at, like, 2/3 to sometimes 80%. So... yeah, it's definitely not vaporware. And with all the AI issues, again, do I have to bring up Google Gemini recommending you put glue on your fucking pizza? Do I have to remind you that chatbots sometimes don't know the year they're in because they're trained on older data and there is a cutoff point, and if the cutoff point is in a different year, it doesn't know the year it's in, right? Do I have to remind you that sometimes it makes basic spelling mistakes, like you asking it how many A's are in the word Apple, I guess, right? And it gets stuff like this sometimes wrong. So Apple wanted, because Siri is working with your own fucking personal context and with the data that is on your screen, that's, of course, like it needs to work better than the 2/3 ratio that we largely associate with today's AI. Nathan hitting the thumbs up. Thank you so much, man. And recommending for others to do that too. Lucky Chucky saying Craig and the other guys like old style. Well, I mean, they are in their 50s and whatever. Craig has had that silver hair though for like 15 years. I guess he has gotten like older with his skin. That's now the dermatologist speaking. But it is what it is. We all age. I have no problem with older people designing and making stuff. Alan Dye is relatively young, though, like the guy responsible for the new design, so that's not really on Craig and Greg. But one thing that I dislike when old people do it, and if you forgive me the meme, right? How do you do, fellow kids? Why? Google, why do I need an AI analysis of the meme? The phrase, how do you do, fellow kids, is a line spoken by the character Steve. First of all, the character is not Steve Buscemi. It's the actor Steve Buscemi. Wait, is he playing himself in that show? It's a meme that has become popular for its comedic, unexpected, and somewhat nonsensical delivery. Okay, that's not really quite, but yeah, basically that's the meme, right? How that's the vibe that I get from Material 3 Expressive. And the vibe that I got a little bit with iOS 7 back in the day, originally with some of the color choices, right? Yeah. Lucky is saying, yeah, I just saw a comment saying Apple needs to replace these old management. I personally like Craig Enthusiasm, and he is from Steve Jobs' era, so he has some pureness. Yeah. You should be using Bing. Why? Should I be like... doesn't Bing force you some Copilot shit on you? I mean, Microsoft was the first to cooperate with ChatGPT and all that stuff. I probably should log in once and then turn off the AI. But yeah, can you imagine like the amount of energy that's being wasted on this chatbot stuff? Like, especially on stuff that's not necessary. Google apparently does not have an AI that's very smart at knowing when you actually want to have AI features, right? Jesus. Let's get back to the interview.
You got off the beaten path, and we know with Siri, it's open-ended what you might ask it to do, and the data that might be on your device.
Yeah, the data, true.
Be used in personal knowledge.
Apple Watch Ultra.
And we wanted it to be really reliable. And we weren't able to achieve the reliability in the time we thought.
But there was a working version of this. This wasn't just vaporware.
Oh, no, of course. No, we were filming real working software with a real large language model, with real semantic search. That's what you saw.
Yeah, there's this narrative out there that, it was demoware only. No, it was, again, something we thought, as Craig said, would actually ship by.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand. They will be like, well, if you were able to show off this thing in June of last year, right? How the hell can you not deliver it until potentially 18 months after this? Well, first of all, even though they showed you those software working for real, it is a curated test. It's a test that was done before. It's also just by the magic of editing, it can delete things that were maybe unsuccessful attempts at entering it. But also there are diminishing returns to improvements, right? First of all, you're probably never getting to 100% success rate with how AI works, especially with AI that's bound to like a device with 8 gigabytes of memory and a 5-watt power profile. But even beyond all of that, right? If Apple got it to 80% in that year, let's say, or if they got it from 50 to 66%, right? Those are great improvements, but every further 5-10% that might be needed to Apple's, like, I assume here they're probably targeting somewhere between 85 and 90%, given where the state of AI is and given the limitations of hardware. That's probably where I would expect it to end up. It's getting harder and harder. If you potentially jumped from 50 to 60% in a month, then jumping from 60 to 70% might take you a fucking year, right? So yeah, it's very important to keep that in mind. Just because they couldn't get it to an end state doesn't mean that the state they showed before was false. I mean, they didn't even show it that much. They didn't even let you like play around with it that much yourself. People say that those like old people experience in designing UIs nowadays, but can't stand nothing OS, which most of the team are young people. Yeah, to me, it's actually my consistent belief is if you are good at your job, you should keep doing your job, and I will evaluate your job based on that. I think there is also a fallacy to believe that because Steve was like old school, that Steve wouldn't have signed off on like the iOS 7 redesign. Maybe not in the ultimate shape that we got it, right? Or that Steve wouldn't be signing off on the design that we're getting right now, right? People believe stuff like this. And maybe some of it can be linked to age and just being set in your ways or whatever. I mean, we don't want to bother Riley, who didn't want to be talking about our exes. Like, it just depends on the person. Some people are 70 and they like have the youthful energy of like a 25-year-old, but with the experience of a 100-year-old, right? There are people who are old but aren't really young as much as they're just like low developed, and they don't mean that in a medical sense, but like they just never learned to deal with certain issues in life. And people who were spoiled always, everything was always provided for them. And then there are just young people who are almost boring at that point because, and maybe not to their fault, but because they had to deal with so much shit, they kind of lost a lot of energy and luster in life. And yeah, it really depends on the person. This idea, we need to go with somebody young just because they're young. I mean, look at what Samsung is delivering with that designer that they got, what is it, from BMW? This massive Apple fan who basically like forced Samsung to like copy AirPods and copy the Apple Watch Ultra. That's not what you want. Nothing does nothing, in my opinion. Nothing creates super standard phone designs with random LEDs glued to the back and random camera arrangements just to stand out. So that's not really a design effort to me. Like a lot of people also forget that Apple has not just like redesigned your phone. Like for example, the iPhone 7 featured stereo speakers before Samsung did it, and they actually managed to do that in the same form factor as like the iPhone 6. They introduced IP67 water resistance, again also before Samsung, but in fact their IP67 resistance was so good that I believe the iPhone 10 was like lost in a river for like a month, and it came out working, right? Which that is not what IP67 is for. IP7 is like splash resistance, rain resistance, and people forget like MagSafe by itself, it is a compromise. It takes up some internal space that could be used for like the battery, but I think it's one of the most ingenious like accessory solutions in like the last several decades. And with the iPad that focus on the magnets, the smart cover and all of that, that is great. And I always am surprised why people like they reduce Apple to like the individual gadgets, and then they pretend like nothing was done with those gadgets ever since those gadgets came out. And that's just not true. And the same thing with software. Sometimes, like a lot of people have said, oh, but like design is also about features. And I promise you, go back to iOS 7. Yes, a lot of the UI elements, some stuff was brand new. Like, for example, that control center in the time, but a lot of the design changes were there for the change of design because people wanted a new design. People internally wanted to switch to a new design. Yeah, I just don't like stupid absolute statements. Oh, young people better than old, or Steve better than all the people working at Apple now. It's such bullshit terms. It's so nonsensical to a degree.
Later in the year, and look, we don't want to disappoint customers. We never do, but it would have been more disappointing to ship something that didn't hit our quality standards.
And I mean, this is something that has been a problem with a lot of tech in recent years across the board. The gaming industry over the last decade has become known to launch very buggy big games. Like games have always been buggy. That's also a misconception, right? That, oh, games were perfect when I was playing back on the PlayStation 2. But a lot of the big, very expensive games, they used to have a high level of polish, partially because big back in the day was a lot smaller than it is now. And games come out in pretty broken states. Cyberpunk 2077 is only like has been fixed for like a year and a half, to be quite honest, not even a full 2 years. And that came out 5 years ago. It came out completely broken on the PS4 and the Xbox One, barely working on the PS5 and Xbox Series. And on PC, while it felt kind of like a good technical statement, it just had even more bugs than it had on console in many ways. So yeah, like a lot of stuff is just changing, and yeah, Apple's own quality standards might shift slightly because the audience is younger, is more reactive. They want more stuff to try out. We see that with the first beta. People are pretending like the first beta is like an official release, probably because they're used to some official releases being as bad as the first developer beta is from Apple. Benveni, I believe if you're good in your job, doesn't matter your age, and people love to put Steve like a saint and Tim like a devil. Yeah, it's very simple narratives. You see that across the board. You see that in freaking politics. You see that with the treatment of certain big companies and whatever. It's very easy. And yeah, Tim, Tim across the board, under Tim, Apple launched AirPods, right? A huge success. Under Tim, Apple launched the Apple Watch, a huge success. Apple did not lose their success in the iPad market, for example, which by the time Tim came into power, the iPad was just at number 2 right? And still, like, that takes effort to make it continuously successful. Under Tim, they launched Apple Silicon Macs, which again, similar to the switch from PowerPC to Intel, required courage and stuff like that. So yeah, and like Tim now has to has to work with all those kinds of regulation and government pressures because Apple is now so big and so important and so much money flows through Apple. And those are even things that Steve wouldn't have had to think about.
That had an error rate that we felt was unacceptable. So we made what we thought was the best decision. I'd make it again.
It's great
Correct.
that you set this high bar, but you're also Apple. I mean, you've got more engineers, more cash than...
That is a misconception, and this is a misconception that I commonly see. And to bring up a gaming example again, something like GTA 6, where people are like, okay, GTA 6 is big, we get it. GTA 6 is technically ambitious, we get it. But why is it taking that long if they have like 2,000 to 5,000 people working on it? Couldn't they hire, with all that money they plan to spend on it over the years, couldn't they hire 10,000 people, but just over shorter periods of time? No, that's not how it works. Sometimes crucial systems are depending on 1 or 2 people at the company, right? They have a lot of people working around them, but if you took for example, Johnny Cerrugi out of Apple, I promise you that would hit their chip business. If you hit the guy right under Johnny Cerrugi and Johnny Cerrugi, you might not get the same quality of Apple chips for the next decade or so, right, relative to the rest of the industry. And I'm just trying to explain people, it's way more complicated than big company, powerful, big company, a lot of money, big company hire a big number of people. I have no idea what accent I'm doing. I apologize if that was offensive to any of you. It sounded vaguely Indian. Maybe that's what it is, but I have no qualms with India. A lot of my viewers are from India, but it was also half Polish, so maybe that's it too. But also, I don't have a qualm with the Polish. A big company hires a lot of people and works fast, therefore. That's not how it works. And a journalist like her should also know better. Angelica joining the chat, one of our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. Benveni laughing at me embarrassing myself. Antonio Fernandez saying, sounds German. Well, that's kind of very good because German is my second language. In fact, I am streaming from Germany. So maybe I kind of just incorporated my regular, slightly German accent from English into a more extreme version. Thank you all.
Most companies, maybe any company, why couldn't you make it work?
I mean, this is new technology. I think when it comes to automating capabilities on devices in a reliable way,
on devices,
no one's doing it really well right now. And we wanted to be the first. We wanted to do it best.
I almost wonder if there is an argument to be made for Apple to delay that feature, not just for software refinement, but also to have it run on 12 gigs of RAM devices. Right? I wonder if that will be a big difference. I also wonder what they will do, for example, like on the Mac, I assume that M4 Max might get new LLMs by default. I'm not sure what they will do with like M3 Pros, M2 Pros, whatever. But like on Mac, I could see M4, all M4 devices getting the same LLMs broadly because it's probably not going to be larger than 8 gigabytes by itself, so roughly half of the 16, that's okay. On iPhone, it's probably going to be 4, right? But I wonder, could Apple maybe push a 6, 8 gigabyte model to iPhones that have 12 gigabytes of memory, right? And that would be a big help to dealing with some of the issues.
And like I say, we had very promising early results in working initial versions, but not to the level that as we began living on it internally and feeling we're like, this just doesn't work reliably enough to be an Apple product. So this stuff takes hard work, but we do see AI as as a long-term transformational wave, as one that's going to affect our industry and of
Max,
course,
you're
our
saying
society.
16 gigabyte on iPhone would help a lot. Well, the example for that is actually Google right now with the Pixel. And they do have on the Pro 16 gigabytes. Then on the regular models, they have 12 gigabytes. On the Pixel 9a, they have 8 gigabytes, right? On the Pixel 9a, they actually had to cut certain AI features because of that. But hey, Max, thanks for interrupting your gym workout. Unless it's over, I mean, I guess the stream is now over an hour long to actually chat with us. Gonna be looking at your XP rating afterwards.
For decades to come. We want to get it right. There's no need to rush out with the wrong features and the wrong product just to be first.
So many people associate Apple and AI with Siri since plus 10 years ago now.
Sure.
And so there is a real expectation that Siri should be as good, if not better, than the competition.
Oh, and I think ultimately it should be. That's
But it's not right now.
That's certainly our mission. Yeah, but that's our mission.
But also, again, different AIs for different tasks, for different use cases, right? Siri is for on-device processing, and no, please stop activating. I should turn off Siri for Hey Siri. And I guess that might have activated my HomePod, but thankfully no. But Siri is designed for internal tasks, right? No matter what happens with Siri, Siri will not become a ChatGPT full-on competitor. And what she's saying is also profoundly wrong, which is just because a competitor does it does not mean that Apple should be magically better. First of all, there's a big bias towards just big company here, I guess. Apple is obviously not being hit by the bigotry of low expectations, if you know what that is. But Apple is kind of experiencing the opposite. But I don't understand it because Apple has not been like the front runner in search engines, whether it's text search or image search or analysis. Like, why is now a different thing being applied to Siri? Max saying, came from the stream, stayed for that sweet XP. Well, hope it's tasty, man. Benveni, I mean, what you said about more RAM makes sense, but let me ask you a question. Why does Apple play so safe to increase RAM? Shouldn't have they increase RAM with the 16 lineup? Well, to be honest, the simplest answer is honestly the correct one here. It's cost, right? Well, there are two reasons, which is cost and supply. Which is Apple deals with such enormous supply numbers, right? Between 8 and 12 gigabytes of memory. I mean, technically you could get 12 gigabytes in the same package, but let's assume literally the 12 gigabytes is 50% more packages than 8. That's a lot more to deal with, and that could cause potential supply issues. Now, do I think that there was an issue with, for example, the iPhone 14 using 8 gigabytes rather than 6? No. But they also had 6, well, no, the iPhone 14 actually used newer memory than the iPhone 13 Pro. So I guess that would have been a good opportunity to jump to 8 gigabytes. But yeah, the primary reason is cost. Even logistics is more of an excuse. If Apple wanted to, would there be a problem potentially if Apple wanted to make the iPhone 16 Pro Max, for example, and the 16 Pro 16 gigabytes, and then the base models 12? Could that have been an issue? Maybe. Would there have been an issue with the 16 Pro and Pro Max being 12 gigabytes and the base models 8? No, that would have been totally doable. Sir Holmes, I wonder if they fixed the Apple Watch music apps. I'll go for a run and it will play music from my phone and not the watch. Wait, how are you? Wait, do you mean you're running without earbuds and stuff like that? That's madness. This is Sparta. It's nothing against what you're doing, Sir Holmes.
You know, we set out to tell people last year where we were going. I think people were very excited about
Also,
Apple's.
by the way, like, this is also against John Gruber, by the way. John Gruber in March wrote that scathing article about Apple, right? About something being rotten. And somewhere, I believe Min-Chi Kuo also said that Apple should have basically come out and like super publicly addressed it. Well, guess what? They're doing it now. The level, what's it level? Blah blah blah. We didn't go to try. So basically, the main reason, by the way, why Apple is pissed, it's not even that, oh, something is rotten, it's like an insult. It's because he basically implies that it's vaporware, and he does it without any actual, like, journalistic insight. No comment from Apple, no internal sources. In fact, the only article we ever get about the internal state of Apple's new AI is clearly saying that it's not vaporware. Yeah, but like he and others basically said Apple should have come out. Well, bro, if you hadn't messed up the opportunity, you would be now the one sitting with Apple making those interviews and holding them accountable.
Values there, or experience that's integrated into everything you do, not a bolt-on chatbot on the side, something that is personal, something that is private. We started building some of those and delivering some of those capabilities. I, in a way, appreciate the fact that people really wanted the next version of Siri, and we really want to deliver it.
So, by the way, Apple, now granted, this is a response, right? But they are using the word Siri here. He could have been deflecting and saying, oh, they wanted the new version of Apple Assistant features and whatever, and new Apple Intelligence chatbot-like features. My assumption is they will still stick with Siri as a branding. Could change. I mean, something like that could also change just like later on. But I don't see it right now. Like some have suggested, oh, that means they're moving away from Siri. But yeah, to me, it looks like they're largely sticking with that branding. Steve saying, again, also hello to one of our other MarkTech Pro Max supporters. I think we have 3 out of 4 now in the chat. That's great. Saying, gonna get myself some XP too for once. Well, glad I found something to entice you guys to the stream for once. Because usually you're like cucks watching from afar. Riley saying, Marcus, the jump from MacBook Air M3 to M4 worth? No. Oh, wait. You mean just in price? For an upgrade, no. For just the device you buy right now, if the storage and RAM and everything is the same, which I assume that's what you mean, I would probably look more for a $100 price difference here. $200 is, especially if you're going with one of the lower configurations, $200 just becomes like potentially 20%, maybe 15%, right? And that's just money that you could put into a quicker upgrade down the line. Yeah, but the OS support, like, think about it. Like, if like M3 will gonna get support years and years down the line, right? Like 6 years from now at the very least. Maybe not all features, but then again, it's not like M4 is like groundbreakingly faster in every way. So you're probably better at that point looking into upgrading, but also upgrading from like the Air to like a Pro potentially. Basically, I can get the 15-inch M3 or a 13-inch M4. Yeah, well, that will also depend on you. I've heard different things. One of my friends bought herself actually a 15-inch M3, and she said it's really noticeable how much bigger it is than previous 13-inch devices, but it is easier to read on it. So I guess like you gain some, you lose some.
But we want to do it the right way.
When's the right way going to come along?
Well, in this case, we really want to make sure that we have it very much in hand before we start talking about dates for obvious reasons.
And will that...
Okay, so my assumption at this point is that Siri is actually going to be on a very tight leash here, which means that if we see her next time, then it's at most like 3-4 months away from release. Probably less, right? It could be more like what to use another gaming term again, like a shadow drop, right? Which I guess is not exclusively for gaming, but like Apple comes out in like February next year, announces the iPhone 17e, and says, you know what? The new OS release also comes with our new Siri.
Include these features that you had previously announced and more? I mean, is this the effort to make Siri this?
Well, Apple, he's smiling here, but like Apple does not pre-announce features without an official reveal. Yes, some of the features might seem pre-announced because they take so long to come out, but like she's literally asking, will Siri come out with more stuff? It's like, bro, that's a lot of pressure. Finger crossed they will cancel personal contacts. You mean so it doesn't take up too much time? What else will be in the new Siri? Well, to go back to the John Gruber article, right? Because he lists those three things, right? Does he list them? Not in a... personal contacts, that's knowing details and information about you from a semantic index built from the contents of your email, messages, file contacts, and more. What's interesting here, will that include potentially third-party apps? Like, what if a lot of your context is happening in WhatsApp or Telegram rather than the official Messages app, right? On-screen awareness. Again, that would go into a little bit what's happening now with visual intelligence going from the camera to basically like a screen recording, but specifically now with more analysis from Siri. In-app actions, giving Siri the ability through the app intents framework. Now, app intents are being scaled up. So if app intents are written well, and if Siri has enough of semantic understanding to maybe understand not perfectly worded app intents, then that should probably be the least difficult. But then the issue with that is also supposed to combine like several intents, like make this photo pop. Yeah, that shouldn't be complicated. Or send the email I drafted to April and Lily. That shouldn't be complicated, but I guess it would be complicated if it said like, add the last photo that I have taken to the email that I have in drafts for April, and also add Lily and send it, right? That would be 3 intents basically. Add photo, add different person to basically the email exchange, and then actually send it, right? Which I assume the send would still require a last confirmation. So it doesn't send like the last nude that you have in your photo library on accident. But I guess the combinations are where it could get complicated. I'm saying that I'm not confident that they can deliver these features anytime soon. Well, the features are for next year. So no matter what happens, they have at least another 6, more like 8 months, because Apple does not really launch too much stuff in January and February, in January at the very least. So February and March, I guess.
More interactive AI companion.
Well, I mean,
well, the problem is also like companion is also like this weird thing, because no, it's clearly not trying to do all the Gemini and ChatGPT features. I guess there are individual features that being worked on. Like Mark Gurman said that they have like a fitness workout partner, basically. I mean, they have the workout buddy for the Apple Watch, but that is largely based on like a Fitness Plus instructor and like voice to text and text to voice and whatever. Like that's not really AI driven, even though it uses your data as a baseline. But I guess what they do now with Workout Buddy could then be turned with more intelligent AI into an actual like partner in that regard. Riley saying the new multitasking is great, but needs a smaller floating keyboard option. For the iPad, yeah, they've always experimented with floating keyboard stuff. I guess now their point is more that you're probably using some kind of external keyboard if you're doing that kind of multitasking. And if you're not, I mean, you will have issues like accessing the menu bar on top, right, without a mouse or trackpad. So probably Apple thinks, you know what, just chill. But I agree with you, it would be a good solution to have less space taken up, because the iPad has that 4:3 aspect ratio, which does mean it has less white space for multitasking like a Mac does. Plus, well, the dock is similar to the Mac, but it actually takes up more space, for at least from my experience. Like most people tune down the Mac dock to be pretty thin, and of course it's designed for touch targets and stuff. So yeah, space needs to be managed carefully on the iPad. That's why Apple refuses to port macOS to iPads.
Look, on the one hand, I would love to dish about my enthusiasm for our future plans, but that's exactly what we don't want to do right now, right? To
Makes sense.
Misset expectations. We want to deliver something great that you and all of our customers really appreciate.
You have mentioned Apple Intelligence a lot, and to be honest, I'm not really a big user of Apple Intelligence. I'm using a lot of your competitors' products. Can you or will you keep up with that competition?
No, they're not. It's like asking, I'm not using the Spotlight search, I'm using Google search. No, Apple does not design. Okay, I guess it's a question that should be asked, but it's not really a question it ignores that Apple is a hardware first company.
Well, again, it's important to realize our strategy is a little bit different than some other people.
Yeah.
Right? Our idea of Apple Intelligence is using generative AI to be an enabling technology for features across our operating system.
No, Benveni, it's very clear that they plan to launch these features separate from a brand new version. I mean, they could technically talk about it at WWDC and then launch it next summer, but that would be too late. That would be after Google I/O. That would be after Microsoft's Build Conference. I do think they have to deliver it by April of next year.
So that sometimes you're doing things you don't even realize you're using Apple Intelligence or AI to do them, and that's our goal.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff happening, even stuff like the 3D effects and the spatializing effects, right? That's trained on AI data. Maybe it's not even requiring like super big LLMs behind the scenes, but it's still something that Apple had to use data to train on, to adjust machine learning. Even in the camera app, just taking a regular photo uses plenty of AI. And now Metal FX things in Metal 4. You have now upscaling, frame interpolation, denoising, all of that stuff that's based on AI that's being run on the Apple Neural Engine that had to be trained on large sets of data, especially gaming derived data. There's so much AI here that people cannot really perceive as AI, even though it is. She said, your stuff sucks, make it the way I want it. Yeah, I guess a little bit. Which is like, again, I still don't understand that. Why should Apple make ChatGPT competitors more than they should have made a Google search competitor? And in fact, I think they should have come out and said it, right? Said, look, if we ever join the chatbot market, right, we're going to tell that to you, Joanna. But for one, we do have something to launch that we have promised before. Well, we have to work on that. We also have other plans in the work. So please let us work on that first rather than asking to be literally like everyone else.
There's no destination. There's no app called Apple Intelligence, which is different than a chatbot. Which is
wow, that's a very good way of Apple Intelligence is not a single destination. It's a set of features spread across your operating system, across your apps. Now it's even going to be trained by and for third-party developers who will be able, like they showed like a hiking app, right? You give them like the map that you want to explore and whatever your own personal wishes, and it will use Apple Intelligence-based AI to create for you a hiking trip, right?
think some people have kind of conflated a bit, like where's your chatbot? We didn't do that. What we decided was that we would give you access to one through ChatGPT because we think that was the best one. But our idea is to integrate across the operating system.
True, Riley. Apple should make dating apps too. In fact, they should also make like those hentai fucking dating simulators that are all over Steam.
That I certainly use every day.
And I think, AI is one of those massive
I don't know. He looks like a grown-up version. Greg looks like a grown-up version of Greg. Or he looks like a shrank-down version of Greg from this perspective.
technological waves, like the internet, like mobility. When you look at the internet, I don't think anyone was saying, gosh, Apple, I find myself using Amazon.com and I'm
Oh,
not
wow, they're actually countering it. Exactly how I am saying.
I use that a lot. Why don't you have one of those? I find this web search thing really useful. I'm enjoying, streaming cat videos. I find this useful.
Yeah, oh my God, shout out to Google Search and YouTube, which, by the way, great that they mentioned Google Search became web search and streaming cat video, YouTube became streaming cat videos. That's hilarious.
Is this not in your product? Well, of course, the internet was vast. It was opportunity for many, many companies, for users to do a wide diversity of things. It was also a huge enabler for Apple, and I think Apple made the internet accessible in a lot of ways, more than anyone. And it was
hardware, their own browser, all that stuff.
super empowering for our customers and for our products. But that didn't mean that every
Greg
experience
in the
that you
half,
might take
yes.
on necessarily is going to happen inside of Apple or ultimately
You cannot even make like a cute couple name for them because I guess it would be like Greg, but like written like Craig rather than Greg.
happen with Siri.
Between you both, you have, I believe, around 60 years of experience at this company.
Yeah.
You've seen the company go through highs, through lows. Where do you think you are right now? There's a lot of sentiment that Apple is on its back foot here.
Well, I think you're right to bring up that perspective because I think when you have been through different waves, you're very accustomed to the ups and downs.
And look, they're reacting friendly. They're reacting professionally. She herself is not wording those questions in an insulting way, right? I mean, yes, of course, it's not great to tell an engineer, oh, there's a perspective that you're on the back foot. But that's a reasonable thing to still ask, even if it's incorrect, maybe. I would argue that the public perception of Apple has to be entirely disconnected from the tech nerd discussions and the very reactionary, like anti-Apple things that you see online, where regular consumers don't even interact with any of those forums, tweets, whatsoever. Much less that they actually like absorb what's inside them, right? If a regular person saw that, they would probably say, oh, Apple does not make ChatGPT. Well, guess I'll keep using the ChatGPT app on my iPhone and Mac, which are greatly designed apps. But like, this is a niche nerd opinion that like Apple is on the back foot, and nerds are not always right. Believe me.
I think we're feeling really good right now.
And look, I hate to be naive, but I remember Steve had come back and he told us, look, what we have to do is create great products and tell people about them. And if we do that, everything else will work out. I love them so much in that way. Like, I love the simplicity of this because it also specifically talks about the product, right? I mean, yes, you can isolate Apple Intelligence as a product and say, oh, it's not that great, right? But what are the products? They're iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, Apple TV, AirPods, right? They're the operating systems, iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS, visionOS, and Vision Pro now, potentially glasses in the work. They're all the separate versions from small iPhones to Plus versions to Pro versions to Pro Max versions, right? They're Macs now going all the way up to like 512 gigabytes, almost like server class hardware. it's all the development tools that are designed to make that better. Everything from Xcode to all the APIs, all the even the design references, right? For every individual icon, for every individual control element. Those are still products, and especially in the way they come together. Like, even if Apple had one bad product in Apple Intelligence, what would be like the death nail here, right? You could still use other stuff. Now she was like, I'm going to use your competitor. But the problem is, and Greg said it best, and Craig actually elaborated marvelously on it, is like, we did not do what the others do. We do not compete in the chatbot market, right? We do not compete there. In fact, we even integrated them, just like they should have also said that. We integrated Google Search and alternatives into Safari. Why is it so different to integrate ChatGPT into Siri than that?
And it turns out that is kind of the case. And we create great products, and we think our products are exceptionally great right now and keep getting better. And again, I'll hang on to that naive theory that if we build great products...
Great. Could do that, man, because only that theory is successful. It's not chasing trends. It's not even arrogance, right? Where sometimes it's like, oh, our product is great, right? Like you have to keep making new products, and you have to keep improving them, and you have to be somewhat reactionary to what's out there. But just because you're not on top of one specific trend that's going on right now, nah, that does not diminish the standing that Apple here has. Benveni, some people always complain maybe they should move to Android. Well, she's a journalist. This is different. I do agree with the broader, like, reactionary, especially Twitter space. Well, I would argue Blue Sky is even worse for Apple, because Blue Sky is very left-leaning. They like to attack big companies no matter what. But like, I would argue that thinking is reactionary no matter what. Like, Nintendo just sold 3.5 million Nintendo Switch 2 systems over the first weekend, right? And people were basically saying, and look, I'm not the biggest fan of the Switch 2. I think it has a lot of things missing that I think a $450 gaming console should have in mid-2025, especially if that system is going to be selling for years to come, potentially with no price reduction, as we have seen from Nintendo. But I do not think that system doesn't deserve the success, because the previous generation was a success. So people are now building upon their libraries. They just want a device that plays their games in a better way. And I think that Apple is so much more involved with their products than even a company like Nintendo, where the products are actually the games rather than the hardware. Like, I think that Apple is doing tremendous work. And where Apple falls short, like cooling, for example, I do keep calling that out, and thankfully they keep improving it. And thankfully this year we're kind of supposed to be getting like the biggest improvement to iPhone cooling capabilities ever. Riley, I'm glad this interview is only 7 minutes, but that's 7 too long. There will be a longer version of it, but I am wrapping this up afterwards, because I do want to be streaming all week. And I do want you guys excited, and I don't want you guys worn out, and I want to also continue with you chatting on Discord. So maybe we'll react to Tom's guide tomorrow, but I definitely want to, I do have to get some personal and some work stuff done for tomorrow.
We tell people about them, everything else will work out.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a new appreciation for Greg here. I always found that Eddie Q is not actually that great in these kinds of interactions. Don't know why. I'm not sure if he is great at his job or not. I mean, Apple services are obviously successful, but like Greg is actually like, he has this calm, almost like very wise energy about him. Craig is a bit more youthful and playful, but also still very professional, obviously, after several decades working at one of the world's largest companies. And quite honestly, I do think it was wrong for his own personal legacy for Johnny to leave Apple. I'm not saying that Johnny should have kept relentlessly working at Apple no matter what. I think he could have and should have relegated more decisions to people like Alan Dye. But I think that like I would be respecting him a lot more than like that stupid open AI contract that he has, which is largely rumored to be just yet another fucking humane AI pin bullshit. Yeah, but that's about it for today. Let me quickly see if maybe there are leaks, news and rumors that I might have missed. Something a little bit more last minute. Okay, so there's just like a lot of summaries happening right now about iOS 26, Apple TV Plus stuff. Yeah, a lot of summaries right now. Not the. I assume that it will be probably around 2 weeks before we get a little bit more into the groove of like iPhone 17 leaks, like iPhone Fold leaks, and we might even it might even be longer than that, because I assume that beta 2 might actually be one of the bigger second betas we ever got, because if Apple adjusts certain design decisions relatively quickly, that will also get plenty of coverage from all these kinds of websites. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. Again, great successful streams from Monday, yesterday, today. Thank you so much. I'll keep an eye out for all the things that are interesting right now in the world of Apple, in the world of tech. I'll keep collecting my own hands-on experiences with iOS 26, iPadOS 26, macOS 26, watchOS 26. Even my TV is now up on tvOS 26. I cannot bring my AirPods to update, but that's probably for the best. And yeah, as always, follow me on all the social media. Join the Discord. That helps tremendously because it gives you a very direct connection, an easy way to influence what we react to here. And beyond all of that, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the video, share it out with anybody who think might enjoy it, and please comment. Don't just comment live, but also please comment afterwards, right? That's very important. You can also donate directly to this channel via super chats and super stickers. You can become a channel member. You can become a supporter over on Patreon. The links to all of that are in the description of this channel. Don't want to waste too much time on that, given that I'll have plenty of opportunities to convert you during future streams. So thank you so much to anybody who's new to the community, to all the reoccurring like usual suspects. It's tremendously fun. I hope I'll be here tomorrow. At worst, I'll be on Friday, but I am hoping to be sticking with my daily streams up until Friday at the very least. Thank you again so much. As always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. Thank you. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.